Today I'm actually going to be discussing the life, as well as the legacy of the 27th President of the United States, who was William Howard Taft. William Howard Taft was born on September 15th in 1857 in Cincinnati, Ohio, which actually happens to not be too far from Madisonville, Kentucky. I've actually visited Cincinnati and wasn't aware that Taft was from there before doing this project. However, anyways, he was raised in a very politically active family. His father was Alphonso Taft, and he was a very prominent lawyer, and he also served as Secretary of War under President Ulysses S. Grant. Taft actually followed down the same path as his father, which isn't very surprising, but he excelled academically at Yale University, where he graduated second in his class. He then earned a law degree later on from the Cincinnati Law School. After his education was completed, he began a very successful legal career. He first served as a city solicitor in Cincinnati, and afterwards, he moved on to become the U.S. Solicitor General. And then during his time as the Solicitor General, he argued cases before the Supreme Court, which is a very huge job. Then following this in 1900, he was appointed a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. His astounding legal career would later greatly influence the upcoming political career that he would have, which started in 1908, which was election year, and Taft was running for president. And the prior president, Theodore Roosevelt, was backing him basically, and Roosevelt was greatly admired for his contributions to the progressive movement, and many people voted for William Taft in hopes that he would continue the progressive reformation that Roosevelt had really started. And in November of 1908, Taft actually beat William Jennings Bryan, who was the opposing Democratic nominee that year, and but issues came up quickly after Taft was elected, actually very quickly. One of the first major things being his trust busting. While he initiated more antitrust lawsuits than President Roosevelt ever did, he came after things such as Standard Oil and American Tobacco, big, large monopolies such as that. His approach was seen as really conservative in comparison to Roosevelt, though, and this angered a lot of progressive reformers who just felt he was not really fully committed to the cause. And something else that kind of landed Taft, I guess I would say, in hot water was the Payne-Aldrich Act of 1909. This act actually raised tariffs on certain goods, and Taft did this actually thinking that it would help protect American industries. However, once again, it angered the progressives who saw this as, almost like a total betrayal of his campaign promises, because he had promised beforehand that he would carry on the things that Roosevelt was doing, and it just didn't really seem like he was, he didn't have the progressives in mind. He was leaning more towards the conservative side of things, and a lot of people voted for him just because they thought that he would be just as progressive as Roosevelt was. And this increased tension, obviously, within the Republican Party, even more than it already was. The tensions were very high at this point, but they just progressively kept getting worse and worse. And Taft's foreign policies also caused a lot of issues. He believed in encouraging U.S. investments in Latin America and places like East Asia would help to stabilize those regions, while while still promoting American interest, and but people felt as if he was prioritizing corporate interest over local concerns. Once again, the Republican Party was divided. I mean, it seemed like with every event, the party became more and more divided, and Taft was very highly criticized as president, but one thing he actually did carry on from Roosevelt was the expansion of national parks, and that Roosevelt had originally put into place, and he worked to protect public lands. However, people still did manage to find a way to criticize him for this, and it was because he was allowing federal lands to be developed, and it was mainly environmentalists that had an issue with this. The Republican Party was extremely divided by the time of the next election, which came around in 1912. He was actually challenged by Roosevelt, who was a candidate in the Reformed Progressive Party, which was also known as the Bull Moose Party, which I know we had talked about in class previously. This split in Republican votes, because I mean, if you think about it, you have some Republicans who are going to be voting for Roosevelt because he is the more progressive Republican, while you also have Republicans who agree more with Taft and his more conservative ideologies. So it really it dispersed the Republican votes so much that, you know, it eventually led to Taft losing his re-election chance to Woodrow Wilson, who was the Democratic nominee of that year. And after his presidency, things actually took a very unexpected turn for Taft. In 1921, he was appointed Chief Justice of the United States, making him the only person ever who's held both positions. Which he's still the only person ever who has held both of those positions. He was the first, and as of right now, he is also the last person who has held those positions, you know, within the same lifespan. And, however, about 9 years later, in 1930, Taft dies in the Washington metropolitan area, and, although he was often overshadowed by his predecessor, Roosevelt, he contributed immensely to the progressive movement in its entirety, and you really can't even bring up the progressive era without bringing up the influence that Taft had. And, I mean, he did have a lot of challenges throughout his presidency, and I think it's honestly a really good example of just how difficult it is to keep a party unified, especially with all the changes that America was facing at that point in time. And I think we can even see that division now within parties. It's very difficult to please everyone, and overall I think that Taft was criticized far more than he should have been, and just like any other president, he helped shape America as it is today.